Today, we're going to talk about why some of your favorite edgy comedy podcasts seem to have gotten softer and softer over the years. I'll save you some time and tell you that it's all YouTube's fault, but along the way there, I'll tell you about some personal stories I've encountered that just kind of shows how shitty this landscape has turned into. Comment, like, and subscribe. It all helps the algorithm. I'd also like to thank the executive producer of this episode, Christopher Hart. Without his big baller support, I'd probably be buying junk cars that used to be popular and then just taking off piece by piece, selling them on eBay because someone needs a bright windshield wiper of a Miata, right? I'll just be stripping that off piece by piece, and it's going to be a slow burn, but I think if I put enough time into it, I could probably 20x my investment on the car. It'll take a while, but slowly but surely I'll get more and more junk cars and just slice off pieces of it and sell to eBay. But because of Christopher Hart and his big baller support, I don't have to do that. And if you'd like to become a big baller supporter of the show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. Welcome to Catching You Up with
Nadav. It's over.
So I remember when I got into podcasts, for the most part, they were all audio only. And audio only platforms had zero censorship. Anything goes. It's not like they could hide your podcast from the suggested homepage of the platform because anyone that was listening to you didn't get there because of a discovery algorithm. They got to become a fan of your podcast because of word of mouth. And gaining audience through word of mouth is a grassroots tactic that's really hard to cancel. Still doesn't happen. I think the only time I've heard that even happening was when Rogan went over to Spotify. But that's how podcasting used to be. That's how I gravitated towards shows like Your Mom's House or Legion of Skanks. There was just no mechanism in place to quiet down podcasts that were using a lot of these 90s words. And I don't know where I got that term from. I feel like the first person I heard say that was Josh Potter. Then popular podcasts started shifting over to YouTube when I got into the industry about 8 years ago, and that became just the standard for podcasts because it's very hard to grow on audio platforms because the search or discovery algorithm sucks dick. But you know where it doesn't suck? YouTube. YouTube's discovery algorithm, and I've said this for the last year, probably longer than that, is the best way for people that don't know about you to discover you. If you're a podcast and you're audio only and you're not on YouTube, you're doing yourself a disservice. Sure, even if you're a popular audio podcast right now, leaving money on the table, trust me. But when an audio podcast shifted over to YouTube and started posting to there too, this allowed your podcast to be connected with people that would have never searched for you. And when I joined Tom Segura's team as a freelancer, it was done on the pitch of, hey, you guys should have a YouTube channel and you guys should let me help you get there. And when your channel is that small, you were able to get away with real crazy stuff. It was actually really fucking cool. But the reach started growing bigger and bigger. 50,000 subscribers, 100,000 subscribers, 250,000 subs, 500,000 subs, 1 million subs, 1.5, 2 million subs. Things were growing to pretty ridiculous numbers, and it was pretty cool to see. And by the time that the YouTube channel had gained that level of popularity, the YouTube landscape had already started to evolve. I think I've talked about this multiple times in previous videos, but there were 2 or 3 YouTube adpocalypses that really fucked around with the community guidelines and the rules that creators had to follow if they didn't want their discovery algorithm to be hindered. And I won't go into too much detail about what these adpocalypses were, but let me just say that it exposed some really weird and gross holes in the YouTube algorithm where you could just kind of tap into stuff and it's just like, whoa, this is like weird stuff to show kids, or like kids are being shown in a weird light in this stuff. And I'm glad that YouTube did put rules to prevent stuff like that from happening again. The rules that they applied allowed for it to be a safe environment or a safe platform for kids to be on, but it also made it a less funny place. No, that's not a good word to describe it. A less creatively uncensored place. And these new rules that were put in place kind of created a ripple effect across all content creators. Now, look, if you were a plain and wholesome channel that was like, hey, let me teach you about landscaping or plumbing or something, like very small chance that stuff affected you. But if you were a comedy podcast that always tried to push the envelope, all of a sudden you had really stupid rules that you had to follow. And that is gay. All of a sudden, if YouTube detected some weird string of words or some weird gestures, it now dinged your video. And if it were up to the podcasters or the comedians or whatever you want to call it, they didn't want that. No one wants censorship. Let the podcast do what the podcast does. You could kind of boil it down to, imagine YouTube is like your boomer mom or grandma. And at any point they were given the opportunity to clutch their pearls and be like, oh, how do you expect me to explain this to my children and or grandchildren? Normally, that's a pretty good indicator for, this is going to set off some systems that are going to ding us. And what does a ding entail? If it deems your content as vulgar, not only is it going to limit your monetization, it's also going to limit the way the algorithm recommends your content to your normal viewers. So stuff that it would normally recommend, like, oh shit, fucking Joseph from Colorado really likes this podcast released on these days. We always make sure to show it to him when a new episode comes up. Now, if it's like, oh, they said some 90s words in this video, maybe let's hold off on showing this to them. And unless Joseph actively seeks out the podcast, Joseph isn't going to be recommended the podcast. So you start succumbing to like, fuck, do we need to actually follow these YouTube rules? So I'll go into my first example now where I really felt the wrath. I was producing a podcast for Tom Segura called Tom Talks. It was a little different from YMH Studios or like that main page. This was being uploaded straight to Tom's personal YouTube because this was more of a serious kind of talk. There's all sorts of people that Tom was very interested in speaking with, but inviting all those serious people onto your mom's house sometimes just wouldn't be a good fit. But we had a guest named Derek Delgado on the podcast, and he had just released a special on YouTube, and I believe at the time of this recording, it's still up there. It's called In and of Itself. Honestly, it's a really great show. I highly recommend it. But during the episode, he was talking about how he was raised by two lesbians for mothers, and that when he went to school and people found out about it, they started using the F-word slur to try and chop him down. And he was talking about how much that hurt him. And in my mind as a producer, I'm like, I don't even need to mark this. We're using this in the purest sense of the community guideline. We posted the episode, and within like a day or 2 or 3 or something like that, no warning, it just got immediately deleted. And the channel got a community guideline strike. What happened here? What's going on? So I hit up our YouTube contact at the time, who I think was someone kind of ranked highly over there. But I remember like hitting her up and I was like, yo, what's going on? Like, why is this episode taken down? A lot of the times YouTube will do stuff and it won't tell you why. It's not going to give you a time code. It's not going to give you anything. It's just like, hey, guess what? You fucked up and now we're punishing you. What do you mean? What did I do? Read the community guidelines and you'll understand. And it's like, no, we won't. No, we will not understand. Please explain to me why this got taken down without like it didn't limit monetization. It's just deleted. So our contact, after looking into it, was like, oh, you know what? I see what happened. It turns out that you used the F slur in the episode, and that's why the episode was taken down. And I immediately asked, do you guys have manual reviewers? And she's like, for stuff like this, we do. I'm like, oh, okay. Well then, are they stupid? Because if the community guideline is to not be hurtful towards protected classes or saying like really crazy words that affect people in a negative way, our guest was literally telling a story on how hurtful that word was growing up. To be fair, I don't think I asked if the manual reviewer was stupid. I think what I asked, I mean, it was still not very nice, but I was like, do they understand the concept of context? I was so full of piss and vinegar back then. And look, that version of me still exists. I just don't have to tap into it as frequently as I used to. After pulling some teeth, the video got reinstated, and I'm pretty sure it's still up now. But I learned a valuable lesson. Sure, you could dispute claims and get in contact with your YouTube rep. Yeah, you might be able to reverse its decision, but by the time you do that, the damage will already be done. So, lesson learned. Then there was a community guideline strike that we got on the main channel. There was a segment started years ago called Horrible or Hilarious, where we showed objectively terrible clips to our guests, or, Tom would show it to Christina, but then there'd be something about the video that would tickle Tom and be like, wasn't the noise that they made funny? Without a doubt, you couldn't really question that they were showing violence and or gore. But you get dinged on certain things where you're like, really? This is what gets us? It was a video of these foreign people playing a game where they would just kind of light their hair on fire. So we uploaded that video, and then all of a sudden, they dinged the shit out of us for that. It was like, hey, you now have a community guidelines strike. You do this again within the next 90 days. That's a second one. I think you just can't upload for the next 7 days if that's what you do, which is bonkers. But I remember angrily calling my YouTube contact at that point again, and I was like, hey, what the fuck is going on? And she was like, what you're doing is you are showing very stupid people how to hurt themselves at home. And if you give them ideas on how to do it, we're not into that. And we will ding the shit out of you. And we're like, okay, don't fucking ding me. We were just like, all right, well, what's like the most normal, like, can we just follow the rules so that we don't have to like be in purgatory for a couple days after we release an episode and we get a manual review and we're able to talk to someone that's actually like, yeah, you're right, this is kind of stupid. Let me see what I could do to reverse it for you. The damage is already done. So more and more rules get created and implemented, and essentially what ends up happening is all these comedy podcasts are just frogs being slowly boiled in a pot of water. If you put a frog in a pot of water that's boiling, it's gonna jump out immediately. But if you put it in a pot and you just slowly turn up the heat and it slowly gets hotter and hotter, you're gonna boil that frog alive. And I don't know if that's true, but I think I remember hearing that in Dante's Peak, starring Pierce Brosnan. But if you've been a creator for long enough, you kind of know how we got here. You're not happy about it until an alternative comes up. Will Rumble do it? Probably not. Is X a good place to post long-form content? Maybe if you're Tucker Carlson. There are so many rules and so many exceptions to the rules. But for the most part, if you want to play ball, you got to play by the home games, the home team's rules. Oh, man. That kind of got there. That kind of works. But every now and then I'll see a comment on something like being, man, you guys really turned into pussies. Look, don't complain to the content creators. Complain to the platform that you're seeing it on, because in no way do these comedians want to censor themselves on their podcast. They try to get away with everything that they possibly can. No one likes this. In fact, everyone hates it. And there are people that choose to follow the rules and people that just say, fuck it, which is a big reason, I believe, why the Legion of Skanks YouTube channel has gotten deleted multiple times. Multiple times they've created new channels. And I think right now, their current YouTube channel is about 8 months old. There's 40K subscribers, and each episode gets north of 80K, 100K views just on video. That's an incredible stat. And Legion of Skanks is one of the edgiest comedy podcasts that are still out there functioning today. But this is the world that we live in. You gotta do what you gotta do. Which is why you can find a lot of reasons to complain about podcasts that you used to really like. It's just the nature of the game. It's the way she goes. And that's this week's episode. I'd like to once again remind you to comment, like, and subscribe here on YouTube and on iTunes because it is available there. And I'd also like to thank all the people that you're seeing on screen right now. They're all producers of the show. Without them, it'd be hard to regularly put this out as consistently as I do. And if you'd like to become a supporter of the show, you can go ahead and click the Patreon link in the description below. Thanks again for a very fun episode, but also most importantly, I would like to let you know
This is a totally unconfirmed news.
we'll see you next week.